Good evening. I'm Maura Schreier-Fleming, the Speaker's Chairman of the Israel Now Forum. The Israel Now Forum is an in-person education day on Israel to be held this November 16th in Plano, Texas. The Israel Now Forum webinar series is a prequel to the forum. We want to thank our webinar partners, Southwest Jewish Congress and Texans for a Safe Israel. Today's webinar features Maayan Hoffman, executive editor and strategist for ILTV News and a seasoned American-Israeli journalist with a career spanning over 2 decades. She previously served as deputy CEO and news editor of the Jerusalem Post, where she spearheaded innovative initiatives like the Christian World, Business and Innovation, and Health and Wellness portals, while also contributing as the paper's senior health analyst. Beyond journalism, Maayan is a strategic communications consultant who has led content, marketing, and strategy teams for top-tier corporations and NGOs. She has held senior editorial roles across the Jewish world, including as editor-in-chief of the Baltimore Jewish Times and managing editor of the Kansas City Jewish Chronicle. Her work has been featured in leading publications such as the Washington Post, New York Post, Health Policy Watch, All Israel News, The Hill, Fox News, and Roll Call. She lives with her 5 children in Jerusalem. Please use your question and answer Zoom feature to submit your questions during Maayan's presentation. We'll have time at the end for questions. And now, Maayan Hoffman and the New Middle East, Opportunities and Challenges for Israel.
So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you hosting me tonight and for a chance to be able to be here and to speak to everybody. So I want to start by, the concept that you just said, a new Middle East. And why do we talk about a new Middle East? So we are 15 plus months into a war that has been fought on multiple fronts. And if you are living in Israel, you know someone who has been fighting in the war, you know a hostage who has been kept in Gaza, and things don't feel good. But the truth is that it is a new era. And I'm going to walk you through sort of where we are today and why we believe that and what's changing and what we think needs to continue to change in order to get us to where we are. And then I'd love to take your questions. So first of all, what has happened in the last 15 months? When October 7th happens, what beyond the bloodshed, the hostages, and all of the pain and tragedy that we faced, something else happened, and that was that Israel was caught off guard. And Israel is a superpower, it's the biggest superpower in the Middle East, and we don't expect for Israel to be caught off guard. So when October 7th happened, many pieces that had been put into place prior to started to come into question. Not even 10 days before October 7th, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood at the General Assembly of the United Nations and talked about a path to normalization with Saudi Arabia. We were considered the biggest deterrent to the Iranian nuclearization. And everyone believed that, everyone meaning everyone, our neighbors, believed that we were militarily strong and capable of handling any challenge. And then October 7th hit, and 1,200 people were slaughtered, and 251 people were taken hostage. And we didn't look so strong anymore. How did Hamas, a proxy of Iran, a terror organization that we believed was not so strong, attack us in a way that literally was like the biggest and most tragic event that we've seen since the Holocaust? It was Israel's 9/11. How did that happen? And all Saudi Arabia and others began to call into question where we are. We didn't start out well. It took us until October 23rd to even begin a ground invasion in Gaza. We were used to running small operations. We weren't trained properly despite the threat for urban warfare. And we struggled tremendously in the beginning of this war. Since October 7th, we lost over 840 soldiers, which is a tremendous number to think about. But in the last few months, we've started to see a shift. Number one, we went up north. We turned our attention back to Hezbollah, who has been firing rockets on us since October 8th. And we attacked in a way that was unprecedented. We destroyed all the key leadership of Hamas. everybody from Nasrallah, obviously, but even everybody directly under him and directly under them. We had been planning it for a long time, but we managed to do this beeper campaign that everybody knows about that will eventually be a movie, where we used incredible intelligence and military prowess to be able to essentially carry out an attack that surprised everybody and killed exactly who it was supposed to and nobody else, by and large. We saw a retaliatory strike against Iran. Iran attacked us. We didn't attack Iran first. But when it did, we took out strategic capabilities that people still don't even know all of what they are. I've spoken to people in the military and commanders that are in very top secret roles that have said that Israel or America, but Israel is poised to be able to do much more damage than Iran wants to let you know. As a result of all of this, we don't love the people who have taken over, but the Assad regime fell. We didn't cause personally in Israel the Assad regime to fall, but it fell because it realized that the rebels felt they could topple Assad because Iran was weakened by Israel. Hezbollah was weakened by Israel. Now in Gaza, it's a little bit of a different story. In Gaza, though we fought very hard and we've taken out supposedly 80% of the military infrastructure, we've seen that Hamas has managed to recruit almost the number of people that we've killed. We only control around 30%. We don't have all the hostages home. But then in comes President Donald Trump. He's elected, and it's a big message to the Middle East. The message is one of strength. It's not about Donald Trump himself. Did Donald Trump do this or did he do that? When he said all hell to pay, he wasn't even speaking to Hamas. Hamas doesn't care what Donald Trump has to say, though they should, but they don't. They're a terrorist organization. They don't care what anyone has to say. But you know who cares? Iran. I spoke to a top insider in Israel who told me that Donald Trump's threat was actually behind the scenes to Iran. He delivered a message that said, "You make sure this deal goes through, or you'll have all hell to pay." Not Hamas, Iran. In addition, Qatar cares. Qatar has a lot to lose if it doesn't make nice to Donald Trump, and Qatar could have gotten us this deal since December. It's not a great deal. We'll talk about that in a minute. But this deal, this shift is also coming because there's a new president in the United States. Biden is a Zionist. I don't think we should knock Biden as an individual, but the cabinet and the people he surrounded himself clearly did not have the best interest of Israel at heart. And the decisions that were made over the last several months tied Israel's hands. The hands will no longer be tied. So we aren't done with Hamas. I'm not going to pretend that we've had victory in Gaza. We got a ceasefire deal. Now, the ceasefire deal is both a victory and a loss. Let's be honest, okay? It's a victory because we need these people to come home. Israel cannot move on from October 7th until the hostages come home. And we need to see these people coming back every week, God willing, alive, but even in coffins, so that we can get the Israelis out of Gaza. And we need that for ourselves. We need that because it's a Jewish mitzvah to return hostages. We need that because we believe from the Talmud that one individual is a world. And we need that because our army can't fight if we don't believe, the soldiers don't believe that we'll rescue them. Because our individuals, our citizens can't go back to their homes in the South if they don't believe that Israel can protect them or will do everything they can to get them back. On the other hand, the deal that we've signed is extremely problematic because, as I said, we still haven't defeated Hamas, and we need to, or we'll never have peace and security on our southern border. We need to have a new paradigm in Gaza. In addition to that, we're trading 1,900 plus terrorists for 33 civilians / soldiers. These are terrorists with blood on their hands who have killed innocent people in Israel. And if you remember 2011, when Gilad Shalit was rescued in an exchange, and we gave over 1,300 terrorists back then, one of them was Yahya Sinwar, who is the mastermind behind October 7th, since eliminated by Israel. But this is very scary. Some of the people we're putting out could later on become very dangerous for the state of Israel. In addition to that, if we ever make it to phase three, it's not clear, and we'll talk about today's development, but if we continue till the end of the ceasefire deal, eventually all of our soldiers leave the Rafah crossing. And the Rafah crossing is where all of the ammunition and the weapons and all of the materials that built this elaborate tunnel system under Gaza were smuggled in. And we've learned anything, if we, which it's not clear, but if we've learned anything from this incident, it's that Israel needs to take care of itself. We can't rely on anybody else. So how are we going to pull back from the Rafah crossing? So it's very problematic. And on the other hand, it had to be signed and it has to be fulfilled. We need to get these hostages home. So here we are, and we are having. I was in Washington over the inauguration. I landed in Washington. I left Israel Saturday night, and I came to Washington on Sunday. And there is a change that has happened in America for sure, and certainly in Israel. I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for. I'm a journalist. I don't have right, left, center. You can, everybody decides what they want to decide. I'm just to deliver the information. But what I can tell you is that in Israel, 77% of Israeli citizens felt that Trump would be better for Israel than Kamala Harris and feel that he is going to make a difference for the region. Now, again, it's not just Trump, it's also the people that support Trump. It's the people he's putting into positions, key positions in the region. We're talking about Peter Hegseth. We're talking about Mike Huckabee. We're talking about people that understand why Israel needs to have autonomy. We're remembering, though Trump is kind of a wild card, to be honest. We don't know really what Trump is going to do. But if you look back at his last administration, he was by and large the most pro-Israel president we have ever had. Not only did he move the embassy to Jerusalem and recognize the Golan Heights, not determine that the settlements in Judea and Samaria are illegal, et cetera, but he also defunded UNRWA. He passed the Taylor Force Act. He pulled out of the JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal. These were acts that actually changed the region. And most importantly, perhaps, he signed the Abraham Accords. And we were ready not 10 days before October 7th. Netanyahu stood at the G8 and said we would have peace with Saudi Arabia. And now that is back on the table. And that is extremely important. Now, Saudi Arabia has given this ultimatum, right, that we have to have a Palestinian state. But no, if you read what they really said, or look at the language, they said we need to be on the path to Palestinian state. Trump also wants Palestinian autonomy, and there's no reason that civilians couldn't have some form of autonomy. But we need to make sure that Israel is secure, and Trump will make sure of it, and Saudi Arabia will still likely sign a deal. And when that happens, the entire Middle East will shift. When I was at the inauguration, the day after, I went to a meeting of the Israel Allies Caucus, the launch of the new year, new leadership, and many, many congressmen spoke. But what was extremely interesting was Congressman Tenney, who spoke about a new Judea and Samaria caucus, and the idea that we're going to work during this administration, and that the White House has potentially already agreed to change the language of how we speak about the biblical heartland. We're not the West Bank of Jordan. This is Judea and Samaria. This is biblical territory. And the language is very important because people don't know that. What is over the green line of 1948? We are talking about Shiloh and Hebron and areas that are extremely important to the Jewish people. And this White House will recognize for the first time that the two-state solution in the way that you envision it is dead. It's been dead in Israel for more than a decade. It's been dead among the Palestinian Authority for more than a decade. Look at the polls of the Palestinians polling themselves. Nobody thinks that they want a two-state solution. And by the way, we gave a two-state solution. We pulled out of Gaza in 2005. We disengaged. And you had your Palestinian states, but it didn't work. They rained rockets on us. They can't sustain their economy. And this has nothing to do with Israel. So where we are today is that we are in what I believe is a turning point in this war for the first time of a very difficult, very depressing, and very scary 15 months that we have gone through. Now the people of Israel are unified. We recognize who our friends are, probably by and large for the first time across the board in the Christian community that has sent funds, that has worked with us, that is part of this White House. We are more unified as a Jewish community. The Jews are what we call born again Jews now. If you talk to the Federation movement, where they are returning to Judaism and to Israel in ways that are unprecedented, possibly because of the rise of anti Semitism, but also because of recognizing what occurred on October 7th. And by the way, inside Israel, the Arab Israelis are more unified with the Jewish Israelis than ever before. There was no riots in the mixed towns. They understood that this crossed a red line on October 7th. And for the last 15, almost 16 months, we have seen everybody working and coexisting together in unprecedented ways. So, what's next? We need to have another solution for the Gaza Strip. We need another, the next day, what does that look like? And we're working on that. But I'm talking to you at a very pivotal, point for the state of Israel and for the United States, and for the world, really. And there's a lot of hope for the first time in a very long time in Israel, and what I felt at the inauguration in the US as well. And hopefully there's good things to come. So I don't want to go over my 20 minutes, so I want to open it to questions.
Thank you so much for that presentation. So the first question, you mentioned Qatar, and it's been said that Qatar plays both sides against each other, funding massive amounts of money into the United States with their own interests involved. And the Arab street doesn't really know about the heinous crimes that were done in Gaza. What do you see in terms of Qatar's role and how they play both sides against the middle, and how Israel can turn that into their own favor?
Look, I think that this is actually more of a United States issue than an Israel issue. We made a mistake, and I think that we need to own up to that mistake, and that is that we allowed Qatar to continue to fund Hamas, thinking that these were humans and not terrorists for a minute, and that if we gave them money and offered them an opportunity for prosperity, that rather than build tunnels and build weapons, that they would want to live better lives. And it came to bite us on October 7th. But Qatar has always played both sides. And I think that finally, Trump is very close with the premier of Qatar. And that's why I believe that when he talked about all hell to pay, he was also talking to Qatar and telling them, Qatar, you want to stay with an American base in Qatar and you want to keep things going, you need to get this deal done. And Qatar could have done it a long time ago. But I think that the role of Qatar is actually quite challenging. I don't think Trump should be so close with Qatar as he is, or as the American administration is going to be now. Qatar has been allowing Hamas to live in the country, in villas, in the lap of luxury, while the Gazans people are suffering and they're causing terror against Israel. I think Qatar either needs to be put in its place or actually act correctly. And I hope that Trump will force Qatar to do that. That's what I can say on that.
Are you optimistic about that?
I'm torn because Trump is very close to the premier, and I'm not sure, and he's a wild card. I have to be honest. I'm not sure. But if the right thing is done, that's what will happen. They need
What
to
does
get rid of Hamas.
do you think they have the Arab street on their side to be able to do that? Qatar.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what we do see, in not just Qatar, I mean, look at Saudi Arabia, look at Iran. The street in Iran, not Arab, but Persian street in Iran, wants to overthrow the government. This is a problem with the regime. This is not a problem with the people. And I do think that there's a lot of modernization going on in the more moderate Arab states. They want peace with Israel, not because they like Jews or they like Israel. I mean, let's be honest, nobody cares. They don't want that. They would fight this battle for the Palestinians if they thought it was better for them. But it's not, because they want peace and they want prosperity. And certainly the crown prince wants modernization in his own country. He's been working on a plan, right, for a number of years. So and he wants security. He doesn't want Iran, who has attacked Syria. Remember, Iran attacked Syria itself, right? Or not Syria, I'm sorry, Saudi Arabia. They don't want that. They don't want Iran to be causing terror. They want to move forward. So yeah, I think there's hope, but the Qatar issue is a question mark, because even under Trump, all of these Hamas leaders lived in Qatar and were funded by Qatar. So I don't know.
What we read about the people in Judea and Samaria and the people in Gaza, they supported the October 7th atrocities, and yet if Hamas cannot remain in Gaza and Judea and Samaria needs other leadership other than the Palestinian Authority, what could possibly be the solution?
That's such a good question. It's funny because it's always the last question that people ask in the last two places in Dallas and in Baltimore. This is the question. They say, well, okay, so what's the day after look like? What happens in Gaza? It is such a big question, but I'll tell you my vision of it based on talking to a lot of different. I speak to a lot of people in my role, and people from the right, the left, the center, commanders that are currently in the army, previous, people who served in the army, and I'll tell you that the thing that sounds most stable is this. We need to finish eradicating Hamas. I don't mean eradicating all the individuals who are members of Hamas. I mean Hamas's rule over the Gaza Strip. You're not going to eradicate a Hamas ideology. It's not going away. But you need to make sure that they're not governing the people because for 18 years they've been indoctrinating the citizens. So citizens that are possibly innocent in terms of their actions are not innocent in terms of their thoughts. They're definitely, 6,000 some odd people plus came into Israel on October 7th, and only 3,000 were Nukhba fighters, were Hamas fighters. That means another 3,000 plus were civilians from Gaza who looted and murdered our people. Okay, this is insane when you think about that. These are the civilians we're talking about. But on the other hand, there's a concept in Judaism called tinok shenishba, somebody who doesn't know. So they make mistakes, so they break rules, but they don't know that they're doing it because they aren't educated. And the civilians in Gaza have been miseducated by Hamas for 18 years. So you can't really expect them to have another ideology, but we do need to reteach them. So what does it look like? I believe that if we are going to move forward with peace with Saudi Arabia, we have a very stable Abraham Accords, believe it or not, even after the last 15 months with the UAE, with Morocco, and with Bahrain. And there are others who are interested in joining Indonesia and others. We've got a very large swelling population in the African countries, that are interested in making peace with Israel and working with Israel diplomatically. We need to leverage these partners and have them help us in Gaza to rule and to empower then the Gaza clans and municipality. If we can do that, and it's not overnight, this is a 10-year plan, it's not a 1-year plan, then we will be able to maybe see the resorts and the beaches and the casinos that Trump is talking about in Gaza.
We have an interesting question that relates to the Saudis. And the question is, if the Saudis enter into a deal with Israel, like as part of the Abraham Accords, can we expect the Saudis to join in the effort against the Houthis in Yemen?
Oh, against the Houthis for sure. The Houthis have attacked Saudi Arabia. The real question is, do we expect them to drop this recall that you have to have a Palestinian state in order to have normalization? Right. And now I believe they are talking about a path to a Palestinian state, some kind of Palestinian autonomy, which I think we can provide. But obviously, not only would it be dangerous and an existential threat to Israel, but the government and the Knesset have voted that you can't have a Palestinian state, not unilaterally driven, developed, and nothing something that can be voted on without it, what we call forgot the word in English now. It's like a super majority in the Knesset. So there's no Palestinian state right now. And
Mhm.
Saudi Arabia said there has to be one. So how do we come to terms with that in order to get peace with Saudi Arabia?
Do you see Sharia law compatible with peace in Israel?
No, I mean, look, part of the problem is you have this axis of resistance or axis of evil, right? And that is what it is, extreme fundamentalism. Look, let's say Sharia law. That was wrong because Sharia law is often misinterpreted by jihadists and by terrorists, and you can't judge all Muslims based on the terrorists among them. Um, there are different sects of Muslims, certainly, and I don't think that most Muslims are terrorists or most Muslims are extremists. But it is becoming, unfortunately, more widespread than we want. In the United States, in Europe, Israel's fighting a battle not just for Israel, but for the world, the Western world. And I don't think you can trust right now any of these countries that still have terrorists, even Syria. The people who took over are Al Qaeda. Turkey is starting to run it. Pay attention. This isn't a wow kumbaya moment where Assad was overthrown. He was overthrown by some, let's call them bad guys. The question is there an opportunity today? Now, many Syrian expats believe there is. Let's see how they really behave. But it's action. It's not just what you see. It's not that.
To your point that you just mentioned, Syria and Turkey, what do you see Turkey's next involvement in Syria, and how will that impact Israel? What will Israel respond?
Yeah, Turkey's a really big problem. Turkey is actually starting to infiltrate, I would even call it the Syrian regime, the new regime, and having too much pull and influence. If Turkey effectively does that, this is extremely dangerous for the state of Israel. Now, keep in mind, went in and we eradicated the entire Syrian army, the Air Force, almost overnight. We did an incredible job in Syria. Now they're building up a new constituency, not only followers, but the military, etc. And depends what role Turkey plays. But if Turkey plays too much of a role, you can expect us to be at war with Syria in not too long. It'll be yet another front for Israel.
Will Turkey be funding terrorists?
Turkey funds terrorists. What do you mean, will Turkey? Turkey funds them today. They fund them. They allow terrorists to go back and forth between Iran and Qatar and Turkey. They give them a place to live. Turkey funds terrorism, and yes, Turkey will fund terrorism in Syria as well. But again, hopefully, we'll get that under control. Right now, it's not looking so good. But if the tide turns, anything can happen overnight in the Middle East. Could
How,
change.
do, how does it look for Israelis returning to their homes in the north?
You mean, is there terrorism still going on with Hezbollah? Do we think Hezbollah is eradicated? Absolutely not.
Yeah, no.
Hezbollah is a very dangerous entity. I mean, one of the things, I'm on this speaking tour and I speak with my colleague Steve Lindsay in many instances. And where we very fundamentally disagree is I believe we fought tactically very well. We're strong. I'm proud of Israel, and I hate to have a but there is a but. We haven't actually won any war. We did an incredible operation in Lebanon, but Hezbollah is still on our northern border. They are not behind the Litani River. And today we learned that the Lebanese are moving back despite, right, our army still being there, not finishing the ceasefire. It's very scary. In March, the government said no more stipends for Israeli citizens. They're going to move back to their homes. And Hezbollah is still it's been harmed, no question, but it is still an entity in Lebanon.
We have time for one more question, so I will focus on the American organizations that have done so much to support Israel. Can you talk about which organizations are getting results in advancing Israel's interests and protecting Israelis? These are the American organizations.
Look, I'm not going to call out one organization over another. Who knows who's going to see this recording? And I'm not the person to tell you this organization is good or that organization is not good. Okay. What I will say is that what has happened from this war, and I think I mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, is that we have figured out who our friends are. You watch, Reverend Franklin Graham comes to Israel and help build resilient centers in the north and in the south and donate ambulances. We have watched the missions that have come in and brought supplies, and we know who those people are. So there are Jewish, there are Christian, there are other organizations that are doing incredible work. And I think what has happened is that if there were hesitation around who we should be working with, Israelis now know who those people are, and they're working much more seamlessly and effectively with those organizations and individuals. And there is a really diverse group of organizations that are doing good work, and there's also others that are doing less good work.
Wonderful, wonderful. Maayan, thank you so much for your time. This was a very informative presentation, and I want to thank our audience for attending. We look forward to seeing you all again at our next webinar, which is February the 19th at noon Central with Jason Wolf, who's the co-founder and managing partner of Iron Nation. He'll be speaking about Israel from Startup Nation to Iron Nation. And of course, we hope to see you all in Plano on November 16th for the all-day Israel Now Forum. Thank you all. Have a good evening. Bye, Maayan.